and welcome everybody. How's everybody doing today? Happy Monday to everybody. We are live today and we are talking about grading. Let me know where you're watching from and we'll be right back after you. Right when we're finished with our intro. We'll be right back. And we're back, and we're here to talk about grading. Got lots to talk about today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. And we're going to talk about a few topics. We're going to talk what grades are not, what are grades, how to grade more efficiently, performance versus proficiency, and grades to improve instruction, and where do participation, effort, and behavior fit into all of this. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and we'll go ahead and get started right away. So, welcome everybody, and let me start off with talking about what grades are not. A lot of people think that grades are motivation. That if they have a good grade, they're going to continue doing well because they want to have that good feeling of that. Or if they get a poor grade, they want to improve, so they're going to do better for that. But grades are never meant to be motivation. Grades are not a way to help kids become more proficient in the language. Grades are not meant to be motivators. They're not meant to be instruction aids, meaning, by the grades that kids get, it's supposed to help them improve their grades in any particular class. Grades are not... They have nothing to do with instruction itself. And so a lot of people have gone the way of, well, let's not do grades because it makes kids feel bad, or proficiency is messy, so how do we grade everybody consistently so it's equally applied everywhere. This is not anything that grades are meant to do, and we're trying to put too much on grades. All that grades are meant to do, hit the wrong button there, is to provide feedback for where a student is at that particular moment in that particular class. So I grade using proficiency standards. So I am grading on listening, reading, speaking, and writing, and how well my students are able to do those things. And so all that my grades are a reflection of where that student is at that particular time. I am not rating them between their fellow students, their peers. I have a standard that just tells me, for this particular level, these are the indicators that I should be seeing for these students. And then I am just looking at the work that I get and measuring it up to those. Are they hitting those standards? Are they exceeding those standards? Are they close? Are they far? Or I don't have enough evidence to make any judgment. So that's what grades are meant to do. It's not meant to put down students. It's not meant to motivate students. They're not meant to be rankings of students. It's merely, where is this student on the road to proficiency based on the level that they are at? Now, the ACTFL standards are a little bit more broad. I like the European ones better. But we're stuck with what we have. So we have them all from novice all the way to advanced, and we have low, mid, and high in each of the areas. So you have novice mid, novice low, novice high, intermediate mid, intermediate low, intermediate high. You have advanced low, advanced mid, advanced high, and then you have distinguished at the top. So there's a lot of gray areas in there, and it is messy. Proficiency is messy. So we don't, you're not going to find a straight linear curve when you're looking at the markers for those proficiency levels. The other thing, I like the European ones because they're more simplified. So you have A, B, and C. So equivalent to like beginner, intermediate, advanced, but they only have 2 gradations within each of those, the low and then the high. So you can be A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. So it's a little bit more precise. But all that grades are, and all that I use them for in class, is to mark where they fall on the proficiency scales for that particular area, whether it's listening, reading, speaking, or writing. So my kids get an idea when they see their grade where they stand. How well do they listen and understand language? How well can they read and understand language? How well can they write in the language? And how well can they speak in the language? So that's what they use the grades for. And it makes it very, very clear where they stand in those areas. So they know, where do I need to focus more to improve? And it's no different than taking any other skill, maybe like horseback riding, or I even remember when I was learning to ski as a kid, they had, different courses, different levels, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and you had to show performance on those. You had to show a proficiency level of each of the in certain areas before you could move on to the next step. And that's what we're doing for our students. I want them to look at and see where their levels are so they can see where they're supposed to be and where they are, and I can help them close the gap so we know what we need to accomplish in between there. Are there any questions or comments about what grades are or are not? While you're contemplating that, we'll go on to the next topic here. And that is how to grade more efficiently. I am not a lazy person, but I'm an efficient person. I want to use my time to the best use possible. I do not stay after school unless I have a mandatory meeting to go to. I don't grade after school. I don't lesson plan after school. I don't do anything after school. I do come in an hour before school, and that's because I'm not losing time with family. My family's still in bed at that time, and I'm more productive in the morning, and I have less interruptions in the morning. So I do put 1 hour in a day extra that is not paid, that is, extra time. But that's all that I put in. I get all of my grading done, including my lesson planning, all done with 5 extra hours of work a week plus my prep period. But I use my time very efficiently when I grade. So here are some couple of tips that I have for grading more efficiently. The downtime. Anytime you have downtime, you should be grading if you have things to grade. Don't let them sit. Don't let them pile up on your desk. So, for example, in my classes, the way that we give listening and reading assessments, we give them back to back. So on a particular day, that'll be a listening and reading assessment day, and they'll take their listening assessment first, and when they're finished with their listening assessment, they're going to go right away to their reading. Well, for me, because my listening is pre-recorded, which is another thing to make things more efficient for yourself, but it's pre-recorded, they do that, and then they start answering the questions. While they're working on the reading portion, the listening's already complete, and I can grade that. Now, a lot of people go, but what about watching out for cheating kids? Well, I can do that too at the same time, because as I'm grading, I can look up after every few questions and look and check around the room as well. If I need to move around the room, I can grade from a clipboard and grade as I'm moving around the room, making sure everything is kosher. But I'm not just sitting there twiddling my thumbs, watching the students like hawks and not getting anything done. So when I'm finished, when the time is finished, I've gotten all the listenings graded before the time period is up. And I may even have some of the reading quizzes graded because some kids turn them in early and I'd already finished the listening. So I use all of that time and maximize it as much as possible. So then during my prep time or in that hour before school, I have greatly reduced the number of assessments that I have to grade. Another way to expedite is to automate. So one of the tools that I like to use, and I'll type it here in the chat, is formative.com. There is a free version and then there's a paid version. I use the paid version because it gives me a couple of other options. But you can make almost any type of assessment that you can think up, you can make informative. They can be oral responses, they can be pictures, they can be written responses, short answer, essay, true, false, multiple choice, matching, reorder the sentences. There are so many things that you can do with formative.com. It's really a useful tool. Now, why I pay extra, I get 2 additional features. There may be more, but the 2 additional features that I get for my $11 a month that I pay is I get cheating notice. So they give me some kind of a notification if they suspect 2 kids might be cheating. Lots of times it's based off of time. So if 2 kids at the same time answer the same question and get the same answer, it'll just flag it. There are other things it does, but that's the only thing I've seen it do so far. And then I can look at those 2 kids and see, is there a chance they could be cheating? Most of the time, no, because they're on opposite ends of the room. So they're not, cheating off of each other. So that's one thing. And the other thing, the main thing, I get to shuffle the answers. Remember in the old days of using Scantron tests, you used to have Form A, Form B, Form C, because you would change the order of the answers. They would scramble them up so kids couldn't copy off of each other. Well, this will do it automatically. So I pay for that feature. So I put my 4 answers in, A, B, C, D, and then it scrambles up which one is the correct answer. So even if a kid looks at another paper on another person's screen, they're not seeing the answers in the same order as that's on their screen. But otherwise, why I love formative, number one, it's really easy to grade, even if you're doing short answer or essay questions. It's still very easy to grade. I can watch the kids take the test from my screen, so I can see what question they're answering. If it is one that can be automatically answered, I can see if they got it right or they got it wrong. I can see how the class is doing. I can see right away which questions they're getting right, which ones they are wrong as a class. Kids, instead of coming up to your desk and asking questions, there's a chat feature where they can, while they're on a question, they can ask you a question and you can write a response back to them. so nobody's getting interrupted, nobody's leaving their seat. You can see it. You can see which question they're asking about. You can make any changes. If you notice there's an error in the key, which usually if it's a paper test or a Scantron, you have to regrade everything, you don't. Just fix the answer key, and formative will recalculate all of the grades. And we use it a lot for data. It gives me a lot of data. I can see on a per student basis, a per question basis, and a per assessment basis where my kids are. How many kids were proficient versus non-proficient, which questions most kids got wrong. So I can look at, is it a bad question? Is there some kind of common error that they're making? That's why they got it wrong. Or I can try to address what the issue is by seeing, oh, questions 3, 6, and 7 were really mostly missed. So I can see what the problem is. And like I said, I can watch this all live from my screen. And it makes it really, really easy. So you can automate when possible. Not everything can be automated, though. If you're doing, short answer, you might be able to automate some of that. But you might have to actually go in and double check the wrong answers just to see if they just worded it differently, and you're going to give them credit for it. But it still self-corrects most of it. So then the rest of it, I can just have to check the ones, a few of them instead of all of them. So those are a couple of ways to be more efficient in like listening and reading. For speaking, I highly recommend against recording your your speakings, and then going back and rewatching them to grade them. Now you've listened to them twice. And now you've taken double the amount of time. I have rubrics already ready. Because we use a learning management system, our rubrics are built into the learning management system. So I just have to click. But even before we had this learning management system, I would have my rubrics pre-printed. I would write the names of my kids on them before they started speaking. And then I could just go through and grade them really quick because I know my rubric really well. So you need to know your rubric really well and grade them while they're speaking. So when they're finished speaking, you can give them their rubric and the grades already in the book. Now, I don't say you don't have to record them. I do record anyways, but I'm grading them live. But if there's a question, either by me or by the student, we can go back and listen to the recording to compare and contrast. Or I go, I don't remember what it should be. I need to rehear that one. But normally, I just keep it for the evidence. I don't use it for the actual grading because I'm grading them live. In a group situation, I'll group all 5 rubrics together. I said now mine are all digital, but in the past it was paper. And then I would just, as they were talking, I would grade each one really quick, put the grade in the book, and then hand them back the rubrics when they were finished. Next group comes up. When it's individual, they give me their rubric with their name on it. I'm listening to them. While I'm listening to them, I'm grading them. I put the rubric, give them back the rubric with their grade on it, and then I put the grade in the grade book. So I'm grading efficiently. I know a lot of people will record them and then play them back later to grade them. But that's not an efficient use of time. Just use those recordings for the ones you have questions on, or if a student questions why they got a certain grade. For writing, most of my writing is graded from quick writes. We do quick writes every week. I do not read every quick write. There's not that much change in ability from week to week to week. So what I do is I will pick one class set to read and assess per week. So we write weekly. My kids think I read all of them. I don't. I just randomly pick one class that I'm going to grade that week. I'm going to read one class set. So for me, that's a maximum of 34 papers. Read them, put the grade on the rubric, and put it in the book. By the end of my grading period, I will have graded at least 2, if not 3, of their quick writes in random order, so they don't know in advance which ones are going to be graded. When I know my rubric really well and I don't mark up the paper, so I don't mark up all their errors, I don't circle their errors, I don't do any of that, because studies have shown it doesn't really help them learn. What helps them learn to write better is to read more. So I don't mark up any papers. I know my rubric. I can read the paper relatively quickly and give them a rubric grade in about a minute to a minute and a half per paper. Sometimes 2 minutes if it's a really long paper. And I'm not a particularly fast reader, but I can read enough of it to get a sense of what the paper is, enough to give them a rubric grade in about a minute to a minute and a half per paper. Probably closer to a minute and a half, unless they're like level 1, which are really, really short. So I can get a whole class set read in less than 45 minutes. And it works really, really well. So I can do that in one prep period, because my prep periods are 45 minutes long. I can read and get a whole class set done. But again, I'm using every free minute. When I'm at school, I'm working all the time. I am not, spending a whole lot of time doing other stuff. When I get to school, first thing I do is make sure I'm getting all my work done. I have a to-do list I set out the night before that I start on right away. Usually getting my grading done first. I'm very good about getting all grades back within 24 hours because kids don't like to wait for their grades. I delegate anything that I can delegate, so I don't have to use my teacher time for that. Copies is one of them. I know not every school allows students to make copies. We allow our kids to make copies in the library only, and our librarian will teach them how to use this copy machine. So I have a student job in my classroom that is the teacher's assistant, and their job is to make any copies that I need. So I don't spend teacher time making copies. You do not need a degree to make copies. So I delegate that out. Any of those kind of activities, I delegate out. So I'm not using my precious teacher time getting that done. And that makes you just more efficient. Are there any questions about grading efficiency or anything that you do that makes it more efficient for you? I know some people assign their kids numbers, so it helps them to put the papers in order, so they're in alphabetical order right off the bat, and that helps them grade really, really quickly. My Learning Management has a search feature, so all I'm doing is starting to type each kid's name in, and it will pop it in, and I can pop the grade in, and then start typing again, and it'll pop another grade name in. So I don't do that, but I know a lot of teachers who do. So they'll assign a permanent number for the year, and it's a number that's associated alphabetically with their name. And so when they're putting the papers in order, they have them already in order. And it makes it really easy to put the grades right on down. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions. So we'll go on to the next topic. The next topic is performance versus proficiency. These are two types of assessments. ACTFL is always talking about performance assessments, and I don't like performance assessments because they are not real world. I like proficiency assessments because they mimic what the kids are going to experience in the real world. By definition, a performance assessment is an assessment that has been practiced in class, and it's assessed in the same context in which it was practiced. For example, if you were doing like an A-B activity, speaking, and you're doing doctor-patient or waiter, restaurant person, someone coming in to eat at the restaurant. You have had these scenarios. The kids have practiced each role. They've been the waiter. They've been the eater. They've been the doctor. They've been the patient. They've been the hotel clerk. They've been the traveler. all of these things you've practiced, and then the test comes up and they do them again. That's a performance assessment, and that's not realistic. It can only assess what you've taught in context, and whether or not a kid is successful is wholly based on that context. Have them try to use the same vocabulary, the same grammar from that first context in a new context, and they can't do it. It falls apart. Remember those days when we used to have to memorize dialogues, and we memorized these lengthy dialogues on how to interact in a restaurant, how to interact with a doctor, how to interact with a hotel. And then I would go to these countries, and I knew my lines. I had memorized my lines, but they didn't know their lines. They answered in a slightly different way or a completely different way. And now I didn't know what to do or what comes next because I had only practiced it in that one context. Proficiency is taking what you're learning in one context and applying it to a whole new context to see if they're really proficient with what you are teaching them. For example, if I am teaching the Super 7 and we did a story with the Super 7 and then we did a different reading with the Super 7, two different contexts now, not just modalities. It's not the story that is told orally and then the same story is told written. It is one story oral, one story written, but using and focusing on the Super 7 verbs. And then when I assess it, I'm assessing it with yet another story. So in each case, they're getting a new context. If I assess it like in one context, that's only application. It's rehearsed. And I don't know if they can apply what they learned in that one context to the real world, to things they haven't rehearsed. So it's really important to do it in multiple contexts. So if I have now a listening assessment that is still using the Super 7 verbs, but now what's different is it's a new story. If they can do well on that, then they really have those verbs down, not just the verbs the way I presented them in the original context. That's why I don't like retells as assessment, because that's a performance assessment. We told the story, we asked questions about the story, we made sure they understood the story. Now we're asking them to repeat the story in their own words. There's no real thinking there. There's no higher order thinking skills there. And even if they are good in the language, but they weren't paying attention to the story, they're not going to do well on that assessment. But if I tell them now to take the story that we did, change the ending, give me a new beginning, or to write a whole new story using the Super 7, that's a proficiency assessment because it's a different context. And if they do well on this, then I can be comfortable as a teacher knowing that they're going to be able to handle themselves out in the real world, because we can't rehearse everything. With listening and reading assessments, I put in words that are deliberately words that they do not know, but they are words they can guess the meaning from context. And I would never have a question on the assessment that relies on them to understand that word. Why do I do this? Because I want them to feel what it's like to not understand everything but still be successful. In the real world, when you're speaking a second language, there are going to be words that you don't know. No matter how fluent you may be, there are going to be words that someone's going to use that you may not be familiar with. And I don't want my kids to shut down because they've only had assessments where they were exposed to every single word on that page. I don't want that. I want them to feel the little bit of pain. Oh, I didn't understand what that word was. but I think I can guess it from the context clues. That's a proficiency type assessment because I'm asking them to demonstrate overall proficiency in the language, not performance on the 10 words that we learned for this assessment. So I will put words in that I know they will not know, but should be able to logically guess from context clues. And even if they don't get them, there are no questions that hinge upon them understanding those unknown words. But I'm throwing them in to make kids feel a little uncomfortable so they know what it feels like not to understand everything, but realize they still understand most. They get the gist of what's going on. And that's what they need to be able to do when speaking with a native speaker. So when we want to assess our kids, we want to try to stay away from the proficiency type stay away from the performance type of assessments, and we want to work harder towards the proficiency type of assessments. Think real world, non-rehearsed type of assessments, because that's really going to give you the best indication of the proficiency level of the student. If I only give performance assessments and the kid constantly scores high on them, I'm going to be confident as a teacher that my kid can do language. But it's a false confidence, because now put that kid in an exchange student situation, or even a vacation situation, or you take them on a trip situation, and quickly what they felt good about because they got all these good grades on performance assessments, in the real world they can't rehearse what's going to happen, and then they do poorly. Then they get frustrated and they feel dumb because they can't do it. So I want to set them up for success right off the bat. And I do that with proficiency assessments. Any questions about performance or proficiency assessments? Okay, if you have any questions, just add them to the chat and I'll keep an eye out for them. Let's continue. And let's talk about grades to improve instruction. Now, I told you earlier that grades are not meant to help kids learn or acquire anything, no matter what subject, not just world language. That's not the point of them. It's just to report how well a kid knows or can do what you taught them. That's all it's meant to do. But from the teacher standpoint, you can use grades to help improve instruction. So I look at my grades. I look at them in multiple different ways. So I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for which areas are my kids weakest on overall, which groups of kids are weak in which areas overall, which individuals are weak in certain areas and overall, so that I can figure it out. So let's say my period 1 shows that they are weak in their speaking skills, but they're incredibly awesome in their writing skills. So I know as a teacher of comprehensible input that in order to improve speaking, they need to hear more language and understand what they hear. So I'm going to scale back my reading activities, which help them to write better, because this class is really good at writing. But period 2 is the opposite. They're really strong in their speaking, but not so strong in their writing. So now I'm going to gear some more reading activities for them to help improve their writing. So I can do that on a class basis, but I can also do it on a small group basis. I could create stations of activities because I notice this group right here is weak in this area, this group right here is weak in a different area, and this group right here is weak in yet a different area. And I can either give homework or assignments or class tasks that will help boost those particular areas. Kind of like what a coach does. Coach looks at his team, finds out where the weaknesses are, and then has each player work on what they're weak on. So I can use this to improve my instruction. If it's individuals, I don't even have a small group that has the issue, I might call the kid in before school, after school, or during lunch to help them come along. We do a lot of reteaching in our school. We're an RTI, response to intervention school. And so we have times where we can pull kids into our classes for what we call workshops. So I could have a speaking workshop where we're going to be listening to a lot of Spanish right at the moment so that they can help improve their speaking, or we'll do a writing workshop or different ones, and I can pull individual kids into those to help them out. So that's how you use grades to improve instruction. You're not changing the grades, you're just taking the data you get from your grade book and you're looking at where the strengths and weaknesses are so that you can focus on what that class or that group of students needs, and you're not wasting valuable class time. So for kids who are really good at writing, if I have a whole class that are good writers, obviously I still want to work on reading and writing, but my time might be better spent to spend a little bit more time on the oral and speaking activities because that's where they're weak. Any questions or comments about improving instruction through grades? Okay, then let's talk about participation, effort, and behavior. I am a standards-based grading person since my second year of teaching. So for the past 20 years, I have been working on standards-based grading. I started in my first year of teaching. I was on an emergency permit, so I had now no teaching classes yet. So I just copied everything from other teachers, and I had my grade book, broken down like other teachers with tests, quizzes, homework, projects, participation, etc. But I realized there is a huge problem in that because I had a girl, Brittany, loved her to death. She always did her homework and did really well on projects, which back then, let's be honest, projects were just art projects, and they weren't really telling me much about their language ability. But she did always her homework, and she always did well on her projects, but she failed every test. She couldn't do Spanish at all, and she was in level 2. But the math in the computer said she got a C. I was like, oh my gosh. I knew, even with my very limited teaching experience that first year, that was wrong. There is no way she should have passed the class. But because of the homework and the projects grades, she did. The math worked out that way. And so I realized there was a problem, and I set out my second year of teaching to find something better. Even before the wave of standards-based grading came into teaching, I was into it way beforehand. I wanted my grades to match my students' abilities. So if a student had an A, they could write and they could speak above the level of the class. And if they were a B, they were writing and speaking at the exact level they should be. If they were at a C, they were just below proficiency. A D would be far below proficiency, and an F would be no evidence. I didn't have any evidence of that. So I worked really, really hard on that. So for the past 20 years, that's what I've done. It's worked really, really well. My grades are really accurate indicators of what my students can do with the language. But towards that end, you cannot put anything in the grade book that doesn't answer the question, how well can they do the language? So, creating, papel picado, the cutout paper stuff in Hispanic culture, not going in my grade book. Participation, how well a student participates in class, is not going in my grade book. How much effort a student puts into it, not going into my grade book. Behavior, whether they are well behaved or poorly behaved, not going into my grade book. Because none of those things tell me how well a student can do Spanish, which is the language that I teach. Do I record these? Absolutely. But we have a way in my grade book and in all the grade books of the schools I've worked at. I've worked for 3 school districts and 4 schools. And in that, we've always had a way to differentiate participation, effort, and behavior away from the academic grade. And I 100% encourage you to do this. So I have a way, we have in our grade book now, we have something called the engagement grade, and we have work completion grade. So my work completion is any assignment I give, like a homework assignment or a classroom assignment. Did they do it or not? We only have 3 grades possible, rarely, sometimes, or consistently. So do they consistently work on their work, sometimes work on their work, or rarely? Everything else, participation, effort, and behavior, fall under engagement for me. So I'll have an engagement grade based off participation, effort, and behavior. And then their academic grade is based on what they can do in the language, and only that. Participation and effort can artificially inflate or deflate the grades. For example, let's say you have a shy student who knows the answers and does well on assessments, but doesn't want to put themselves out there for and participation in the class. They're too shy. Well, if you give them a low participation grade because they're not always raising their hand, and you add that to the academic grade, now the academic grade is artificially deflated because of that. Then you can also have the opposite happen. The kid who always raises their hand, but they don't really have any knowledge. They don't do really well at assessments. But because you're giving them a high participation grade, it inflates their overall grade, and it's not accurate. And behavior. Some people will put in behavior grades. And, let's be honest, there are a lot of jerks in this world, and some of them are quite successful. So behavior is not an indicator of whether or not someone is proficient in the language. And our academic grade should 100% reflect that and only that. So find another way to record and share with parents participation, effort, and behavior. Some schools use a citizenship grade. Some use work habits grade. Ours are called learning behaviors, and as I said, we have engagement and we have work completion. But don't put those 3 grades in with their academic grade, because you can either artificially inflate or artificially deflate the academic grade. We want that academic grade to be 100% pure. Is everything that's in that academic grade, does it answer the question, can they do my language, and how well can they do it? That's the stuff that goes in the academic grade. Everything else goes in a separate grade, and they should never mix. If you don't have participation, effort, and behavior grades that can be separated, then use your comments for that. At the end of the grading period, when you can write comments to parents, that's where you might want to indicate that in there. Whether they have a high level of participation and effort, or they have a behavior issue that is causing problems with their overall achievement. But keep the grades separate. So that's all that I have today. Do we have any questions or comments? Any kind of discussion that we would like to have? Give you a few moments to type in the chat box and share. You guys have been a quiet group this week. I highly encourage you to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. That will help it get out to more people. I do this immediate immersion live every week. So every week, same time, same channel at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time on YouTube. I'm not sure what next week's topic is, so look out. I usually post it out on Friday for next week's topic. If you have any ideas for topics you'd like me to talk about, let me put my email address up. Here is my email address, scott@immediateimmersion.com, and share with me, and I'll add it to my list of things to talk about. But if there's nothing else, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys showing up today. And if you found this helpful, as I said, please like and subscribe, and you can share it with your colleagues if you think they might find it helpful as well. I wish everybody a great week. Enjoy the rest of your week, and until next Monday, I'll see you next time. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.